Hey, everybody. Welcome back. My name is Jeremy Francesi. Welcome to the Marketing Water Cooler podcast. Steph, what are we getting into today?
Let's talk about the role of an agency in producing technical content.
I dig it. So let's frame up what technical content is, what that market looks like, and kind of how it ties back to marketing, right? Because for you, if you're a functional CEO and a functional owner right now, or a head of marketing, frankly, this episode may or may not matter for you depending on what business you're in or what industry you're in. So let's start off with this. Couple definitions for technical writing. I'm going to rattle off a few just so you can kind of wrap your noggin around it. Technical writing is a type of writing where the author is writing about a particular subject that requires direction, instruction, or explanation, right? It could be academic writing, it could be business writing, but this is something that revolves something technical, potentially something with occupational fields, something that's maybe technology, it's healthcare. It's something that requires, how I look at it, as a fundamental understanding of the industry, market, or function to be able to effectively write about it, right? Meaning this is change management, cybersecurity, healthcare, compliance and regulation, right? It's a little bit more than a blog post. This is something that is typically supported by research. It's supported by subject matter expertise. You have something built into this technical writing that creates a case study, a white paper, or potentially even something that is you could stretch down the line of scientific research. But what it comes down to is you need to have experience in a specific subject that is more along the STEM route, I would say. Like, what's STEM stand for? Science, technology, engineering, and math, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I would lean into it. So if you're a functional owner, a leader in something that is cybersecurity, technology, change management, IT, computer hardware, software, I'll say government regulation potentially, right? Taxes, and things of that sort. That's where technical writing can be of value, because you can't just write about that because you want to write about it. Like, you really have to have an understanding of what it is from a technical standpoint to be able to communicate effectively what it is and why it matters. Does that make sense? Like, that was a little convoluted. Now, second to that, and why it matters, right? If we frame it up a little bit, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics states that the demand for technical writers is expected to grow 10% from 2014 to 2024. So obviously we're at the end of that stretch, right? And it's faster than the average for all occupations, right? So in the scope of all jobs that are growing, it's ahead of the pace. Now, that being said, let's talk about why. Right. Actually, I think here's something we should do. I'm looking at my notes for the show. Why don't we frame up non-technical content so that we have context? So non-technical writing is a type of business writing that's intended to provide general information that's likely to be helpful for a reader in some manner, but it's not concerned with assembling facts, figures, instructions, or otherwise for the reader. Okay. So that's where a blog post can be a little bit more, not puffery, but just puffery is not the right word, but it can be a little bit more soft in its support of its perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Technical content needs to be supported in some way, shape, or form by research, facts, figures, something from a technical standpoint. That's not just you talking about how great your services are.
Right.
Right. So hopefully that helps frame it up a little bit. So what we're looking at, and now how this connects to marketing, is white papers, right? If you are in a cybersecurity firm, you may want to talk about the state and the evolution of the threat landscape and how that impacts a CISO in making decisions at an executive level for mitigating risk and preserving the integrity of the organization, right? What makes that technical is that for you to have a blog post or a white paper, something that creates that type of value, there needs to be research. There needs to be chronological data that is injected into the piece to establish credibility. You need sources. You need something that helps establish more than just the landscape is changing and you need to care about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's start here. The role an agency plays in producing technical content is actually the second question that needs to be asked. The first is, why does it matter for you in the game of marketing?
Sure.
So we've used some of these stats in other calls, other sessions, but this is what we know. In a B2B technology sales environment, but let's kind of pull it into the greater B2B evaluation process. So give some 5 to 15% room for the how it's being kind of extrapolated a little bit. The average buying process those buyers are spending 5% of their total evaluation time with vendors, meeting with them, acquiring information from them. Only 5%. So let's say 15%, just for the sake of trying to create a little bit less risk in saying that, let's just assume that it's a little higher. So 85% of the time they're evaluating a solution, it's not with vendors that provide this solution. That's one thing. Two, there's 6 to 10 decision makers per buying process. And I think it was, I don't have the data off the top of my head. I want to say it was something between 40 and 60% of companies now have a buying committee. And on that, studies show that between those individual stakeholders, those decision makers, evaluation representatives, we'll say, right? They go acquire between 5 and 7 unique sources of information to fund their research and development of solutions and what needs to happen.
Right.
So what does that mean? It means that the majority of the time customers are evaluating solutions. It's not with vendors, which means they're going out to get information to educate them, direct them, help them understand the market, help them understand the problem, help them understand what's the standard in the industry, and learn about how companies are approaching it, understanding their perspective, understanding what the options are so that they can meet with their team. Everybody's bringing things to the table. And then, oh, by the way, in 15% of the time, they're actually talking to you as a vendor. So they need things to review. They need case studies. They need thought leadership. They're going to find these things because the market tells us and the data tells us they're going to get 5 to 7 individual pieces of information per person. You have 5 people in a decision-making process, and the average person's getting 5 pieces. You got 25 individual sources of information all sitting on the digital table of that discussion.
Right.
They're not all pulling nonsense blog content of like, well, I saw this. They're probably getting technical information because they can substantiate the claim that something is the way it is, and therefore they believe they should take certain action. As a key executive, the technical content helps you substantiate your claims to better. So that's, in my belief, why there's a growth in that space, because the shift in the buyer psychology is the buyer's in control. Information's abundant. They're going to go get what they need and they'll come back to the table. So now that we have an idea of the client needs the information because they're going to get it, and your job in the marketing process is to support their customer's journey. So when they are interacting with your sales team, they are learning, gaining advice. They are feeling the value of not just the solution, the demonstration, the overview, but they feel like they're with an advisor that can truly help them impact their business. And when they're not with you, they're learning from you on their own time when they're in bed at 9 o'clock after a long day, scrolling their phone and reading a PDF. They're looking at a case study that a colleague sent them saying, hey, I work with ABC company. This is some recent success they had. They just sent this out in their email blast. I think it's pretty interesting. And it talks about a net savings of 17%. They're not meeting with you. They're on their own time, but they're starting to learn more about you and develop a digital relationship with you. So now that we know that piece, right? And if you're, in truth be told, if you're not bought in at that point, then you might be missing the boat.
Sure.
Right. Just the truth is, like, you know, if you have yet to fully lock into the value of content at that point, not Instagram posts. Right. I'm talking about understanding the value of what these clients are actually looking for to fund certainty. They're looking for certainty in making decisions. Can you solve the problem? Are they aware of the problem? Are they aware of the alternatives? How does it impact the business? That doesn't come in a nonsense post. It comes from technical information that speaks to the industry, the state of affairs, and what you are doing about it. So how does the agency support you? So there's a couple approaches. You can fully outsource it. Hey, company, you write content for a living. We need you to write all of our white papers, all of our blogs, write everything. And we don't want anything to do with it. Here's the challenge with that. Here's the challenge with outsourcing 100% of your content for technical writing. That could be a blog post, right? You're still research, data-driven content. Here's the challenge with that. Nobody knows your customer as well as you do. So if you're trying to target a CISO or a CTO, and you're talking about technology, and you're hiring a company that just writes about anything, and they don't engage you to be the subject matter expert, the voice of the piece, then it's going to be very challenging for that content to resonate with that desired stakeholder. Because it's like, you know, we're doing a piece right now on built for an asset classes, right? And we have a private equity firm that's raising $500 million to invest in a certain asset class. And we want to start putting out thought leadership content that's education for and about emerging asset class. And the best way I can draw a parallel to this is I wouldn't hire somebody that is going to write a post about a checking account when our job is to build digital rapport and add value to somebody that is looking to invest as an accredited investor.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we try to educate an accredited investor on the value of a credit card, then they're
just not going to pay attention.
Well, they're going to look at you and say, I'm definitely not in the right place because this is definitely not for me.
Right.
So the challenge with fully outsourcing it is you lose the level of proximity you need to the core value of the client. And that is going to come from the people in your company that talk to the customers. So
right.
Can you do it? Yes. Do we recommend it? I personally don't. I think there's a partnership that needs to take place between the people that can write things and the people that actually know the space beyond the level of like, we work with writers that all they do is write for cyber, that all they do is write for healthcare, that all they do is write for finance. The woman that I hired to write for that piece, she was a trader on the floor, right? With, I think, Goldman. Like, she understands finance. We're not hiring somebody that does like personal finance and casually talks about investments because she has access to Google. This is the world she lives in. I still interviewed the managing partner of our firm for 45 minutes with a set line of questioning to understand and extract his perspective, his experience, his analysis on the situation, transcribed it, gave it to Anne, and now she has what she needs to get in motion. So here's my belief and what we've seen to be successful. Creating technical content requires a partnership between the subject matter experts in the company, in your organization, and the third party. You can do a lot of this internally. You can have that marketing person internally sit in on those, or, watch the Gong recordings, or interview somebody, or get access to your top people that are really immersed in the clients and interview them once every 2 weeks for 45 minutes, transcribe the interview. And now they have the working skeleton of what to put together. But it also comes down to they have to be a strong writer, because that only gets you so far. Right. But in an ideal scenario, you have a hybrid of outsourcing. You've identified. So what we look at as employee generated content, I look at it as a content inventory audit based on the subject matter experts we have in our house, in your organization as a client. Who is capable of speaking about what from a position of authority? Once that's an ongoing process. It's not like before we start making, we get this organized. It's like, who are our champions, right? And then from there, it's an interview based on the design. Who's the target audience? We want this piece to provide value to key stakeholders and core in this level of organization in the federal sector. Good. Now we've identified the objective for who we're trying to communicate with. Okay. Now you build the line and what do we want them to do by reading this? Engage with us? What's the desired outcome? What's the change in behavior? You identify the frameworks that make the piece effective. Then you go write the line of questioning that you ask the subject matter expert, record it, capture all that feedback. Now, here's the thing. If you do it right, now you have content, not just for the written technical piece. Now you have audio content for audio visual content, animated, kinetic typography, podcasts, potentially, audio experiences. So you can use this technical, writing process to create really efficient marketing. But if we want to isolate into really what we're doing here, I think the best way to do it is a partnership. The agency's role is extracting the content from subject matter experts who are typically too busy to write, while framing target audience, piece objective, what's the actual framework of it, and then where's the content being distributed into the world? Is it into the website as a content-rich page? Is it into the business development folder for sales resources they need to go drive their process? That's the job of the agency, to frame up what are we doing, how do we get it, extracting the insights you need, and then being cognizant of where it goes afterwards. Then they do the writing. The client approves the content writing. You go back and forth and lock in the copy. Then the agency uses their graphic designers to apply brand standards and bring it to life so it's a finished piece of content. All of that said, like I said, I think we did half a dozen last month. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's a 60-minute conversation. Transcribe it, give it to a technical copywriter. We have great people we work with that turn them around in 48 hours sometimes. They're fantastic. The client agrees with it, locks it in, maybe adds 2 comments, it's locked, sent to design, and you have a beautiful case study in less than 10 days. So it doesn't have to be complicated, but it does need to be a partnership. And so I'll kind of pause there and see, Steph, if you want to add anything or poke any questions in there.
I think just, for me, the way this kind of boils down is the sort of ideal partnership in terms of at least the way our company works out is you get the ingredients from the company who is our client, and then we can make soup and dinner and lunch and etc. with all of that stuff.
Exactly. Well, I always say that, right? We create like we cook. Focus on getting fantastic ingredients, right? Audio ingredients, video ingredients, written ingredients, right? Whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I will say about writing great technical content. Understand what you need and where it's going before you start writing it. I'll give you a specific example. If you are writing a piece and the idea is we need a case study because the best thing we can do right now is run a Facebook ad against the visitors of our site for the last 90 days. And the call to action is a case study of somebody in their market, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's how healthcare CFOs are stabilizing rising labor costs as COVID accelerates. Here's a case study of how we did something.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're not asking them for a demo. You're not asking them to book a time. You're just, look, we've already made an impact. Take a look at it. That should be written with that in mind, right? You need to understand where it's going. Right. And then the other thing is, each piece, two things, and then we'll close things out. One is each piece has certain requirements that make it a strong piece. If you're putting together a piece on thought leadership, a white paper, if you don't have data in there to substantiate what's happening, like you might as well just make it a blog post. If you're writing a case study and you don't have anything from the customer that actually experienced the value, you're missing all of the upside.
Right.
So like you have like we have a case study extraction workflow that we work with, which is why we're so efficient. It's a set of like 8 to 10 questions that goes through how'd you identify the problem? What tipped you from nothing to something? When you went from nothing to something and you identified there was a need to take action, how did you go about building requirements? And how did you end up with this vendor? What was the alternative? What made you say yes? When you went through this, how did you build the requirements? What was your experience like? What surprised you? It's, what after it's stabilized, we have a very clear set of questions, but we also have a couple things. We need quantitative value. What data do you have to support the qualitative insights you've given us? What measurable improvement do you have to provide? What does the system track? Every case study has something about data. 2, we always leave with at least 2 quotes directly from the subject, the client contact. Now, we explain to them, this is on the record. We're going to use this. We're not saying, hey, Joanne, we're doing something. Do you have a statement for us? Like, this isn't like,
Right. You have to be transparent about it.
Always transparent. But you got to understand what you're trying to accomplish, because also recognizing that I know when our team steps in and talks to our clients' customers, that is a very important thing for us to recognize. Come prepared, be punctual, knock it out of the park, and be a positive reflection of the company that we are working with.
Right.
We were, the last 6 case studies we've done, they're all federal agencies. We're talking to high-ranking government officials, right? They're not putting video on cameras.
Right.
So there's a level of respect that has to be done, and there's a level of care that has to be exhibited when you're doing these things, where you're not wasting people's time. You're coming in prepared. And then the last thing I'll add on this, and then I'll open it up if you want to add anything, Steph, is I've talked about a digital accent before. I look at it like, when our grandparents text us or mom and dad text us and it feels like an email. Right. Heavy punctuation. That's a digital accent, right? It's no different than if somebody comes overseas, they don't speak English and they're trying to learn the language or other language, and they're working through, but there's an accent, right? When you go from not speaking in a native digital environment to a digital environment, you're going to have a digital accent because it's not your native environment for speaking and communicating. That's okay. But when you have somebody speaking about something technical, cybersecurity, IT, cloud computing, hardware, software, healthcare, finance, investment, whatever it is. When you have somebody that doesn't know that space, writing and speaking about that space, you can hear the accent.
Right.
They're not speaking natively about it. And you can understand that there's not an in-depth, intimate understanding of the material. That is where fully outsourcing it, it's not that it can't be done, But if they're saying and they're promoting, we write for everybody, run. Because
Sure.
there's no way to do that effectively and write a food blog at 9, a private equity piece about the Sharia compliant investment landscape with the growing Muslim community and financial literacy at 1, and then at 4, pop in and do something on the ever-changing landscape of cyber and cloud computing. Now, can you? Sure. But you have to be in the 1% of executional capabilities to be able to deliver on that value.
Right. Or
And
someone has done all of the preparation beforehand and says, great, we just need to make this palatable. Here's all of the information.
bingo.
Right.
But you have to understand for your organization, what's the negative impact of a digital accent? What's the impact of feeling like you're using marketing material written by somebody that's speaking about an industry that they themselves are not a part of, which is why I take pride in explaining to our team, we have a creative network deep. So when you come to us and we work with our growing client base of private equity firms, they know that we don't have 40 financial writers. Because when we need to talk about Sharia compliance, I go to somebody else. When we're talking about the built for rent asset class, we're going somewhere else. We have deep, deep relationships with people. So when we have a different specific element to write about, we have an expert to do it. We're not saying, hey, I know you kind of write about finance. Can you do this cyber piece? Because that doesn't work. Because the CTO, you're trying to use that piece to get their attention, right? Marketing is not about companies, services, and products. It is about humans. Companies do not buy from companies. Human beings buy from human beings. You have to build things that resonate with a human. And I promise you that CTO will smell it a mile away when they're reading something and they're like, this is not written from somebody at my level.
Right, right.
And so that's the punchline. That's the role the agency plays. Got to have a partnership, got to know the customer, got to understand the value, got to understand the intent, the distribution. And then from there, sky's the limit. Because if you have a really great process, you can churn out high quality content. If a couple pieces are in play, that add tremendous value to the business. And so with that in mind, I think we covered most of it. There's definitely some more little stats that we can throw out there, but I think we covered the gist of it. Steph, anything you want to add or ask before we close up shop here?
I don't think so. I think just, making sure you're having the right people doing the work that needs that sort of specific knowledge is important to know, to make sure that people understand that you understand what's going on versus we're just like painting a wash of color other than, something more specific. General
is the biggest problem in marketing right now.
It's the biggest problem in a lot of things. Yeah.
It is, but that's what we talk a lot about. It's really important to know who you're trying to connect with. And unless they are a really strong market research firm, you can't outsource what you know about your target customers.
Right.
Unless they are a market research firm, unless they already work and serve that market. And so, look, with that in mind, to kind of pull things together today, we're talking about technical content writing because the communication landscape has changed. It's not because technical writing is now super hot and everybody loves it. It's because the buyer is spending more time going and acquiring information on their own with their key stakeholders to acquire the information they need to drive the process. So that when they go call you and ask for some help, they can get the demo, the price, the overview, a little portfolio, a little bit of track record, and make a decision. Because information's out there, and your clients, your competitors are putting out technical content. It's pasted everywhere if they're doing their job right. And so a lot of value there. But with that in mind, look, thank you for sticking around. If you're still plugged into the Marketing Water Cooler podcast, the goal is to create a couple pieces of value, but it really comes back to having a little bit of a digital oasis here where as marketing professionals, we can plug in and talk about the state of affairs, what's moving and shaking, but also as a functional owner of a company or a key marketing leader that's looking to learn and acquire really what is a modern approach to marketing, right? We don't have agency background, so we're not really handicapped by what it should be. We're focused on what works. And we hope you're finding value in this. We hope you're finding it actionable. We're going to keep moving our way through a question at a time, and we're gonna kind of learn and iterate as we go, right? And so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, new episodes live 3 times a week. And with that in mind, Steph, thank you for hanging out, keeping me company, and everybody else, you as well. You guys know the deal. We'll be back for more. Stay tuned, and thank you so much. Hey, thanks so much for sticking around to the end. If you liked the video, smash the like button and hit subscribe so you can stay up to date on all the new episodes. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. We will fold them into future episodes and make sure that you get the help and the answers you're really looking for all things marketing and communications.